Hey, Drawing B class, hopefully you're staying well. I have a slideshow for you about your next project. It's going to be doing a diptych or triptych. You get to pick. There's a project sheet in there I want you to look at as well. But first, let's talk about some examples and what a diptych or triptych is. It's making an original set of drawings that's going to be your project requirement. Throughout history, there's all sorts of different versions of diptychs and triptychs. This is by Hieronymus Bosch of The Last Judgment. But it's really older piece from 1500. And there's even modern versions we'll look at, of course. But you'll see that it's about having three or two images that correspond with each other. And most of the ones we're looking at first are triptychs. It can be like this where it's a huge scene and it all plays together. And in the older work, it's a lot of times like an altar type of piece. This is about the Last Judgment of Christ and the world going haywire. And sometimes they're on a single piece of paper, like this print from 1844. It's a woodblock print. And the princess is reciting a spell on a handwritten scroll. She summons up a giant skeleton that comes rearing out of the terrifying black void, crashes through the tattered palace blinds. This is the description of it. See this kind of idea of something happening and happening. It's almost like a comic panel in a way, but older than a lot of comics. But there's a connection, a cause and effect that happens in 3 panels sometimes. So it could be across the scene like the last one, or this one it's like one scene broken up. Another example of this is like a theater performed at a play, like the people holding the things. So it's kind of like different characters have their own panel. But it could also be like this piece from Lichtenstein, Transformation, his style. It's like not realistic, but representational, less and less realistic down to like abstract art, and he's making a play on that type of idea, using the same elements and changing and making more geometric. Here's the eye. So it's like a deconstruction of something into abstraction, but you'll see there's like a feeling of connectedness in the style in all of these. So they need to feel like they belong together. There's a lot of examples from art history of crucifixion type of things. This is a 16th century mosaic with pieces of glass and stone and even bird feathers in there, by anonymous artists. So it's got this sort of feeling of the people viewing it and all the details. This person was a Mexican artist, they said, so has a certain reference to the church, friars and things like that, and different placeness of maybe Mexico or the Southwest. This is another Rick Lichtenstein piece doing the same type of idea, playing with the elements of the design and his characteristic style using comic influence. Here's a piece that's in folk art from 1978 about it's like outsider art is considered folk art a lot of times, people who aren't necessarily trained. It's about Mr. Lincoln, President Lincoln, doing the proclamation, Gettysburg Address, and also his connection as a young person. So it's like a landscape and what he did. Interesting piece way of doing it. Sometimes the pieces are like less clear as to how they're connected, but we feel a connection because like the marbling on the paper, but then each one is separate. You'll see sometimes the panels, like here, this is not square. A lot of them are square. This one almost feels like one long piece of paper, but it's bordered a lot. And then what is it doing? It's got color unity, a kind of feeling of something happening, but you're not sure what, so it's a little bit enigmatic. This is by Judy Chicago. She does a lot of work about power and masculine power. She's a feminist artist, so she's playing with the emotion of people and how they use it: surprise, anger, fear, sadness, to use power. And she's using the same figure and palette throughout it to unify it. Just show you some examples of like different types. This is hand printed in pencil with with photographs. So it's the idea of people at work. It says, not in clanging fights and desperate marches only is heroism to be looked for, but on every bridge and building that is going up today. So it's about people's labor being heroic in New York City. So using the imagery of that and kind of having an inscription is something common. You have a lot of things to play with here. This is called breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's kind of got a lot of humor in it about frogs eating bugs, but then there's a face coming out of it. So there's like a kind of a play on life cycle of animals and our own life cycle as well, and a lot of other things going on in this piece too. And using color but unity through the style. Interesting piece. This is a photographic piece that's showing an actual interior, looking down towards the end, the ceiling looking backward the other way. So it's kind of dealing with space. This is a drawing class, so you're going to have to incorporate, as it says in your assignment, some kind of realistic drawing involved in it. Observational drawing. So these are interesting ways to think about that. You get a sense of place through the triptych. Something about this one I really like, because it's like telling a story about a whole place and then driving in a journal almost. Cairo, Illinois, White Bull. It's from 1991, called White Bull, Cairo, Illinois. So you can get a sense of feeling of like, by Tony Fitzpatrick, of like a story happening or a travel log or journal. You'll see that it's framed all together as one piece and they're individual in there. So it doesn't have to be three separate pieces of paper. It could be though, or board or whatever you're going to use. But this kind of gives you another style. This one's about fame, ink on handmade paper and fibers, Emma Amos, Tina, Tony, and Lena. So famous people or singers. It's kind of commenting on a lot of different things about race, maybe identity, famous artists who are black women. So it's got like all that going on, and it's got different frames for each one hung side by side on the wall, but they're all framed the same way and they belong together. And the background's unifying it, right? And the foreground, the stage, similar style but different characters in each one, people. So that's interesting way to handle it. This one, same thing, framed separately but very close together, dealing with this poppy on the end of a diving board, which the poppy has a lot of different significance in certain countries about war. When in England they use poppies to remember the war. So there's something happening here about that maybe. Diving board plants, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. We don't have time to unpack every one of them, but I want to just show you how they kind of have this blankness drawing your eye to the most interesting part in it, but then it relieves it in each way and you have a vertical movement. So it's like a scene broken up. You have to be more representational in this, but I like the idea of how this piece has like an unfolding and changing, like a metamorphosis happening through it using the same color. Watercolor, it's by Jania Tashipe. I don't know how to say her name properly. Mixed media on paper, ink. So you could do stuff with mixed media on this. JanainaTschpe is her last name. Jania Tashipe. These ones are kind of funny, more collage, but you're dealing with Paulo Rigo called The Fisherman. This is watercolor drawing as well. Pastel on board, sorry, it says, not watercolor. So showing you kind of characters that he developed and kind of a feeling of strange postmodernism. This is more, again, way more, it's painting Egyptian Triptych by Warner-Davies. He's a British artist, oil on canvas. Way more, way more graphic than your work will be in this class, but you can incorporate these type of elements and then have parts of it that are realistically drawn. But these are three canvases side by side without really a gap, or one maybe a large canvas. It looks like they're broken up though. So you know, you want to think about how you do this when you do it. If you want to have things that are connected, these pieces are like actually a piece of paper side by side. And this is interesting because it's about a war and a torpedo hitting a ship. In Tokyo, it was made in 1904, Tokyo. It's a woodblock print, but it's titled "RT Torpedo Hits a Russian Warship in the Great Naval Battle of Port Arthur." So it's like a feeling of place and action happening, and the triptych kind of moves the action. I kind of feel like I wish it would have had more space between them for that exact reason. But again, more of a really feeling of a place. You're looking out of a window in an apartment, and there's this twisted thing in the middle in another space that's playing with spaces and color, moving your eye across. By Kanishka Raja, Oil on Canvas. This is another one by the same uh, artist about the great. It's called Picture of the Russo-Japanese Great Naval Battle at Port Arthur. Same type of idea. Individual scenes that are connected, like close-ups, even more of a close-up, further away, looking the other way, Japanese flag. So national identity is happening here for sure, and some kind of victory. I like these a lot. The colorful, there's like a central figure. You'll kind of notice in a triptych, the middle panel ends up being the most important because it's in the middle. Our eye pays attention to the center, and it feels like everything connects to it. Especially if they're all the same size, or if they're not. The one in the middle sometimes is a lot bigger, and then these ones are a little smaller, rectangular. That can be an interesting way to go. It has a sort of altar feel when you do it that way. So I want you to think about that. This is called Large Zoological Garden, August Mack. Um, so it's about visiting a place, the kind of sense of the scene unfolding. This one I put here to show you the difference. You don't have to have them all the same size. It can be different sizes, and this is a feeling of like looking down in space. It's by Mario Dubsky, 1939, Natural History. So it's feeling like a place, sense of place, like animals, natural history, water, looking down clamshells. Interesting, tied together, the way it's framed all together. And like almost, it looks like the frame is actually only on the outside. So it's an interestingly different shaped piece. I want to show you this one too because this is by Mary Frank from 1999. It's a painting. It shows you that you could actually have them attached and then have them curve out like a book. Actually bends and folds. This probably could fold in on itself. And there's a feeling of a scene, a woman moving with an owl each direction. It's pretty evocative, and there's a person and a person and a person. So the three is being reflected in that idea of symbolism, psychologically, owls, wisdom, things like that happening. Again, making it different. I'm trying to show you different ways you could really play with it, but you have something where figure, skeleton grabbing another figure, and then like kind of I guess you could say some kind of horror to this. 2008, Catherine Garcia, graphite on paper. In this way in which it's twisting up is part of it, right? It's like an interesting part of the project that this is off kilter and gives us kind of a intensity to it. Other ones I want to look at are not also laid out this way, like left to right, like you don't read them left to right like a panel. And I want to pay attention to that in other ones too. Like you read left to right, but then you end up going here. Okay, then you realize this is most important because it's bigger. You go here and then it brings you back, right? Same with this. How you read the images, eye movement is what I'm talking about. So we have some characters, and then it looks like the focus in some ways on the sky, what's moving and what they're watching. And so if you look throughout the piece, there's still eye movement happening throughout the piece, and the way that the characters are looking and their background and their close up too, then there's more, so there's a crowd developing to watch. It's an interesting piece. It's by Gary Schneider. It's one panel, but it's a triptych at the same time. All right, I'm gonna do another video to talk more about this, and I'll post it as well. In the mod, I'll post it in the module as video too. I got about 20 more slides and some diptychs to show you.